Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Today's going to be a comparison between two super popular blades and two blades that have a lot of similar features, okay? One is the Zero Tolerance 0350. The other is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. Both of these are very popular blades for their respective companies. Both of these are very popular blades among those who are interested in knives. You know, lots of people have commented on how great this knife is. Lots of people have commented on how great this knife is. And so I want to compare them because I also think, in addition to the fact that they have a lot of the same features, you know, G10 liners, G10 stainless steel liners, S30V blade steel, they've also, I think they're kind of looking at the same market. You know, a lot of people who would be looking at a mid to high-end everyday carry knife are going to consider both of these. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into our comparison and have some fun. So let's start off with the Zero Tolerance 0350. This knife, in terms of size and weight, is 7 3/4 inches. 7 3/4 inches open. It has a 3 1/4 inch blade and a 4 1/2 inch handle. All of that, which is a fairly short, stocky size, it's nearly, it's about 1 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 inches thick in this dimension, and it's just about 1/2 inch thick in the handle. So all of that size comes in at 6.2 ounces. Okay, so 6.2 ounces. It's you know, a pretty short, stocky blade. Now, bit of a contrast here when we look at the Paramilitary 2. You have 8 1/4 inches, so a full 1/2 inch longer than the 0350. The blade is 3 1/2 inches, which is a 1/4 inch longer, even though the cutting edge is less in total, and I'll talk about that when we get to the blade. The handle is longer at 4 3/4. In fact, this handle is a little more than 4 3/4. It's not quite 4 7/8, but you've got a lot of handle here compared to blade. All right. Handle to blade ratio, the 0350 probably does just a little bit better in terms of efficiency, while the Para 2 has often been criticized for having too short of a blade for the length of the handle. I don't mind it at all. In fact, I love the ergonomics and I love the balance of the Para 2, so I'm not going to complain at all about that, but maybe you will, and maybe that's one of the reasons you would prefer the 0350. So that's size and weight. You have a slimmer, lighter blade here. You have certainly a heavier, stockier blade here. In terms of toughness and durability, we'll talk about that when we get to lockup. I think a lot of people who are buying this are buying it because of that zero tolerance, built like a tank mentality. Certainly there are some aspects of this knife that would be a little tougher, a little more robust than the Para 2. However, do I think that you're getting the equivalent to 2 ounces heavier in extra performance? Probably not. You know, I think you could have lightened this knife up and it's still been just as tough. And I think this knife, even at its very lightweight, is a very tough blade. Okay, so they're fairly comparable in that, even though this one weighs considerably more. For that reason, I'm going to give the edge in size and weight, carryability to the Para 2. Okay, now the next category we want to consider is the blade. Now this one is a little tougher because these blades are very different in their design. Of course, this is a Ken Onion designed drop point with a recurve. This is Sal and Eric Glesser design, and it is sort of a typical Spyderco blade style, sort of a modified clip point. And you can imagine if this wasn't cut, it would have that typical Spyderco leaf shape. All right, so how do these blades compare to one another? Well, there's a couple interesting things that need to be pointed out. Both are S30V. They're both going to be very good in terms of edge retention and in terms of corrosion resistance. Now, what needs to be noticed here is not so much the difference in the blade style. Both of these are very good slicers, okay? And one of the things I've got to give Zero Tolerance credit for is that the 0350, the 0300, and the 0200, despite the fact that they're heavy, overbuilt blades, are actually quite good in slicing tasks, which is not common for those kind of heavier blades. You know, if you compare, let's say, this blade to the blade on the Line Steel SR1, or the why can't I think of the blade I want to tell you right now? the Benchmade Adamus, or a number of others that are super heavy built folders, this is going to slice way better than a lot of those. Now, that means these are very equivalent in terms of slicing ability. If you prefer a recurve, of course, you've got it here, and I actually really like recurves. The other thing that I think is noticeable about this is that you have a 3 3¼ inch blade, but you actually have 3½ inches of cutting edge. Okay, so this, in terms of efficiency, in terms of how much blade you're getting for size, this does very, very well. On the other hand, the Para 2, you have 3½ inches of blade and only 3¼ inches of cutting edge. Partially that's because of this choil here, and of course the blade shape as well. So, in terms of efficiency and in terms of cutting power, especially typical EDC tasks, I think the edge goes to the zero tolerance. One of the things I have said before about this blade is it's not a good penetrating blade. The blade is not designed for that, and that may be important to you, in fact. If you are, let's say, a firefighter, let's say you're an EMT, lots of different tasks where you may have to cut something without cutting something else. You know, you're cutting clothes off a person, you're cutting yourself out of some kind of entanglement. This blade is going to work very well for that, where this blade, because of that very sharp tip, there's some danger there of causing damage to yourself or the person you're trying to rescue. Okay, so be aware of that in these two blades. I think in the category of blade, I really like both of these blades, but you've got to give credit to the 0350 for a very capable and efficient blade here. Okay, so I'm going to give the blade performance and styling to the 0350. Now, let's move on to lockup and deployment. This is an area where there's a little more difference, okay? The Para 2, of course, has the compression lock, which many of us are familiar with. The way it works is you have, you know, a leaf spring in here. It has been called a reverse liner lock, but that is not at all true. Okay, a liner lock works by putting a leaf that folds over under compression, so that when you try to fold the blade, it pushes down, and that can't happen. The compression lock works by putting a small thin piece of steel that pops in between two others. Okay, so when the blade is being opened, it gets to this point, and this piece of steel pops in between these other two, and it's pinched in there, and that's what keeps the blade from opening. So they function actually very differently, and the length of steel that you have under compression is very different. Both are under compression, so if you try to close this blade, you're going to squeeze this piece of steel, right? You try to close this blade, you're not trying to squeeze this piece of steel that you can see here. What you're trying to squeeze is the very tip of this piece of steel in this direction, not in this direction like in a typical liner lock, but in this direction. You're squeezing it right here, and that is a very, very strong configuration. Is it stronger than these very thick liners on the 0350? Probably, just because it's a very small piece of steel under the same amount of force, essentially. Now, having said all that, do I have any doubts about the ability of the 0350 to remain open and safe for me using it? No. Would I use the Spyderco as if it was a fixed blade? No. So, although I believe the compression lock is as strong or stronger, they don't really matter a whole lot. Now, one thing you should know is that this zero tolerance, this 0350 has been de-assisted, okay? So now it's just a flipper. It does flip well, and this is a very smooth knife. Zero tolerance does a great job, generally speaking, on the deployment side of things. This, of course, as well, is a very easy to deploy blade and very popular. You know, tons of people talk about all the different ways you can open a Spyderco. Generally, this has an assist. So if you prefer an assisted opening blade, and some people I know do, you may prefer this one. If you prefer de-assisted, that may tip the scales in one way or the other for you right away. Now, one other thing to consider is the fact that this blade is fairly easily de-assisted. You just pull the torsion bar out of there, and now you have just a manual flipper that functions very well. It does have a detent and a detent ball. It does have a detent hole and a detent ball already in place, so you don't have to try and do any of that like you would with the 0300, the bigger brother to this. Okay, So lockup and deployment, both are certainly usable. Both are very strong, very capable, especially if you see the size of the liners in the 0350. However, I'm going to give lockup and deployment to the Para 2. One, because the compression lock is such a great idea, such an efficient and really ingenious way to lock up a knife, number one. Number two, for me, it's just funner to play with. You can flip this knife all day in a million different variations. Lots of times, if I'm sitting around watching TV or watching YouTube videos, I'll get one of my Para 2s and just, you know, open it, close it, open it, and close it. If I'm on the phone, you'll often, you know, people ask me, what's that clicking sound? Well, that's the clicking sound. It's the Para 2 opening and closing. Okay, or some other knife. You know, I have a few. So, lockup and deployment, both are totally capable. Both are a lot of fun, especially this in assisted opening. I do like that. However, in this case, I'm going to give deployment to the Para 2 for just the fun factor and for the extra strength achieved by that very ingenious compression lock. Okay, so that's lockup and deployment. How about the handles? Well, here you have nested stainless steel liners in G10 scales. Here you have non-nested stainless steel liners in G10 scales. Both of the G10s on these are very grippy. Both of these handles are fairly comfortable, although for me and my size hands, the Para 2 is considerably more comfortable because of that length. Now, if we were having this conversation about the 0300, I couldn't say that. I love the handle on the 0300. The 0350, however, even though the length is only not even a quarter of an inch different, yeah, I guess it is about a quarter of an inch different. Yeah. The usable amount of handle is less. So on the Para 2, not only can I use the whole handle, but I can even use part of the blade to grip the knife. So I've got a lot of room. On the 0350, not so. I do not have as much real estate, and because of the way this handle is designed, notice how it slopes back. The furthest this finger can go is right here. So I'm actually losing almost 3/4 of an inch of the handle. I'm being pushed back into a further position. So because of that, I end up not having enough handle to fit my whole hand, which I'm not a big fan of. Okay, now for you, maybe for you this size is fine. Maybe you have smaller hands. Maybe you just don't care about the fact that this portion of the handle has to sort of tuck into your palm instead of be coming out the way I prefer. And if that's you, then that's totally fine. Okay, so for me, the handle is a pretty obvious one. The Para 2 takes it by a mile. I will say the pocket clips are similar. Okay, this is of course a Casey Lynch clip, and that makes this a deep carry clip, which is great, and I love it. Under like sort of normal, actually, hold on, look at that. So in this Para 2, you can see that it wouldn't be that big of a difference. There's a little more knife in pocket because of the shorter length on the 0350, but neither of them are really deep carry, and so they're fairly comparable. And by the way, both are very functional. They both work well. Lanyard hole is either one. I think this is a little small, but I think you could fit 550 cord through here if you really worked at it. Here you could fit double 550 cord through and do that kind of where you put a loop through and pull the other side back and do that style of lanyard. Okay, just so happened that I had this knife with me today. I forgot, because I meant to. My plan was to switch these at lunchtime. I carried this one this morning. This one this morning. I was going to carry this one this afternoon. I dropped this one in my pocket, meaning to take it upstairs, and didn't. Anyway, so now there they both are. One thing that I should point out is that there are a number of variations available in the Para 2, but guess what? There are also a bunch of variations available in the 0350. So if you're one of those guys that likes to do something different, maybe you like the tiger striping, maybe you like a stonewash, there's carbon fiber and M390, there's all kinds of 0350s out there that are sort of special editions, limited editions, whatever. The same is true of the Para 2. You can get it satin finish, black finish, you can get the sprint runs. So both of these have lots of options available to you to sort of make it more suitable to you specifically. Overall, these are both very good, very capable blades. I don't think either one, if I said, hey, what are you carrying today? And you said, oh, I've got a 0350, I'd be like, wow, cool blade, man. And if you said, hey, I've got a Para 2, I'd say, wow, cool blade, right? For me, and for my, my mileage, for my uses, I find the Para 2 overall to be a better knife. I find the blade shape is good enough, even though I would suggest that the 0350's blade is a little more versatile and very, very good. Not only that, it is a little stronger. There's more blade steel toward the end, and I forgot to mention that. So I will say this is a stronger blade, and if that's a major concern, that may be the deciding factor right there. If you see it's a very fine tip on the Para 2 and on a lot of Spydercos. So that may be the thing that sort of turns the tide for you. Anyway, both of these are great blades. I hope you enjoyed the video. It was a lot of fun to make, and hopefully you were able to get some good information about the way these two knives work and about which one is better than the other. Overall, I do prefer the Para 2, I think, for size and primarily, let me just say this in closing. Primarily, the reason I prefer the Para 2 is to do this with size and weight, okay? This knife is under that magical 8-inch number that you guys know I like, and it's under 8 inches and still weighs a ton, 6 ounces, okay? This is over my magical 8-inch number, which I know is arbitrary, but it only weighs in at 3.8 ounces, so under 4 ounces. You got a really lightweight blade here. Carries like a dream. This carries more like a brick, okay? So, that's my take on these two blades. Hope you enjoyed the video. Now I really am done. We'll talk to you soon.